Thanks for giving me the time to chat today, guys. It means a lot. Um,
Thank you for having us.
Probably one of the things I'm most wanting to know about you guys. There's a lot of discourse at the moment surrounding hardcore and its ethos. I think a bit archaic, but a lot of people think, to remain small and remain at these small cap shows. And obviously, speed has grown exponentially. So, how do you handle going against these kind of old ways of hardcore and shifting what it means to be like hardcore by, getting big? How do you now define it, I guess?
It's a good question because it's something that we're like grappling with every single day.
Mm,
Um, we, I mean, we've grown up in hardcore. We've been going to shows for like 20 years now, um, and we very much like prescribe to like a very traditional understanding of what hardcore is.
mm,
Um, we, yeah, I mean, we're hardcore kids, and that's like who we are first and foremost. Um, But at the same time, like hardcore has shifted so much in the last couple of years. Um, it's in a really interesting space at the moment where there's a lot of attention, especially from the outside world. And prior to starting Speed, like the one thing that we wanted was to see hardcore flourish in Australia because it was in a really, really kind of dull spot at the time. It was hard to get people to come to shows. There wasn't a lot of active bands. There wasn't a lot of active labels. American hardcore bands weren't really coming out here the way that they had in the past. Um, and now, if we fast forward to right now, it's kind of the opposite. There's so much attention and there's so many people who want to be involved in it that it's actually kind of at risk of being diluted.
yeah.
Um, and so, for us, we've just been trying to navigate our band kind of being on this pathway where we have more attention than we ever expected to have. There's a lot of hype around us as a band and around hardcore in general. And that's really exciting. We have an open mind and we don't want to shut any of that down. But at the same time, we don't want it to be the kind of thing that compromises what hardcore is and what we love about it. So I think for us, it's just it all ties back to this mission that we had when we started the band of just being a band that advocates for hardcore culture in Australia and always putting the community that we come from as first and foremost. So the way that we kind of do that is just every decision that we have to make. Um, we just ask ourselves, how is this a benefit to our community? How does this help the people around us? How does this build up the scene that we come from? As opposed to it just being a direct benefit for us personally. Um,
Yeah.
that I think is the only way that we can really navigate it is just by always having that mission in mind and always just asking ourselves, how does this benefit the community?
Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, Speed started as a hardcore band, and that's all we have ever aspired to be. We're just a hardcore band, always straight up. And we've had moments, as you've recognized, that push us out, be broader than the space itself, which
Mm,
has been incredible and surreal to experience, but it's also, as Josh said, been difficult to navigate. But what's our choice? To run away from that?
yeah.
I don't think that what's happening right now is a Speed thing. I think it's a crazy thing for hardcore in general. And we just so happen to be wrapped up in it. And we just know that what we're doing is with the truest of intentions, and that
Yeah.
we feel that we have all of our values intact. Um, but also further to what George said, there isn't a band that we can think of that's navigated the exact position that we're in right now, which is
Yeah.
exciting, but also scary and also challenging. Um, can hardcore grow and grow and grow and still remain? Can we continue to grow and grow as a band and still remain like purely hardcore? That is our challenge, and that is the challenge that we're trying to live up to, and that
Yeah.
we aspire towards.
I think it's interesting because obviously you're saying like all these challenges coming across, and some of those challenges have led to big things. Like you guys were just in the US and you're off very soon, like no time to stop. I myself am from the West as well, and it's incredible to see you guys rise because you don't see a lot come out of here. But I guess what's been the biggest challenge being propelled to the world acclaimed status and leaving behind the small streets of Western Sydney?
Well, we don't really feel that we've left any of this behind because
Mm,
speed is just a product of our friendship circle and our community, like around us. We're carrying that energy, we're carrying that identity with us in every step we take. Um, I think to answer your question honestly, like as things level up and as we've been thrusted into these different spheres, which are seemingly larger than life in some ways, that idea, that acknowledgement of our identity and who we are and where we're from, is the most important aspect of who we are. It's the most important part of us to hold intact, because as soon as we forget that, as soon as we leave that, let that go, you know, if we are the product of our community and we're a hardcore band, as soon as we let that go, we cease to be a hardcore band. So no, I don't feel that we've kind of left it at all. When we're away, we're kind of thinking about coming back home too. We miss it.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
it's just kind of doubling down on who we are as the environment around us changes. You know, like we just spent 6 weeks in America playing, opening up for Knock Loose, playing in like theater-sized venues between like 1 and 5,000 people every night. Big barricade in front of the stage. You know, it's an environment that we're not really used to playing in.
Mm,
So for us, it was just like, okay, we need to figure out how we adapt to this environment and how we communicate who we are and what we're about as a band, and that we are a hardcore band, and that this isn't the normal kind of circumstance that we play in.
mm,
um, and trying to kind of win over that crowd and communicate that message. I think that's the biggest challenge at the moment. Because yeah, at the end of the day, we don't want to change. We don't want to be too big to play a 300 cap hardcore show. We would
mm,
love to be able to still play the same venues that we've played growing up and be a part of the community that we're already a part of. So um, that's the biggest thing. We just want to maintain our identity, and we want to be the same people that we've been since before this band.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess like only one mode is coming as this new opportunity to present yourselves, to tell more stories. However,
Mm.
it is marking itself a little differently because it is your first full length release. Obviously, you've done the EPs and singles and other compilation pieces, but was there anything different in creating a full body of work as opposed to your EPs, like making sure a story flowed or anything like that?
I think the context in which we went into creating it was a little bit different
Mm,
because prior to the LP, everything that we'd made was with the intention of it potentially being the last thing that we ever did. And then the last record that we put out came out just as kind of the lockdowns were ending.
mm,
Um, and our journey from that moment to now has been completely unprecedented. Um, like we've toured America like 5 times since then. We've been to Europe twice. We went to Asia. Like we've done so much in the short time that we've been able to really play, that our like the goalposts have really shifted as to
mm,
what our band is capable of. And so creating the album, it was kind of like, okay, we never even really planned to make this, but it feels like a necessity now to justify why we're here.
mm,
Um, and I think with that as well, like our relationships have been pushed into this really unconventional space where, as 5 friends, we've experienced things that most friends don't ever experience. Like we've been just on a roller coaster for 2 years, and so I think that the record is very self-reflective in that sense. I think that it's very much informed by the experiences that we've had in the last 2 years. And I think that while we always had like a really strong like philosophy behind the band, that's really been developed and honed in on a lot in the last 2 years, just with the experiences that we've had.
mm.
And so I think that whether directly or not, really kind of shines through in the album.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like with the album as well, obviously it's a piece of storytelling of narrative audibly, but there's been a really big emphasis on visual storytelling, I think, in this album cycle as well. Obviously, you've got the short films and the music videos, and even the single covers are really inspired. I'd like to know like a bit more about this process. Is it a band directed storyboard? Who sits down and comes up with it? Is it a go-to videographer? Like, yeah, a bit more about that process.
Pretty much most of the concepts I've come up with
Mhm.
And just like Josh said, like going into this album was a big process because we started as a band that was this music was written to play 200 people or 100 people in Sydney. It was not meant to be played to these thousands of people now around the world. It was just
Mm.
mind blowing. So walking into this album, from the music writing to the visual piece and everything, it was a huge process of reflection of what is my purpose, what is my meaning, what is my message now that I have an audience that's so much bigger than I ever imagined. And besides the music, if there's one thing that I can really feel proud of and own that Speed, channels as a unique part of who we are, it is our personality, and it
Mm.
is our personality, um, and it's our passion. And so with that, I think the visual element is really important because if you look at the demo in 2019, it's a photo of us. And that was a conscious decision because I knew that when people were going to listen to it, they might just assume that we're an American band. But when you see the cover, you realize that no, they're made up of different people and they're actually from Australia too.
Mm.
And I think representing ourselves visually is important in telling our story. And also in the terms of the movies, in each of them, it's showing facets of our community, different individuals from our community, and different parts of our experience here on the ground in Sydney, where the entire all three videos were filmed and recorded. Um, and that's the way of us exporting our culture to the greater world. It's us
Mm.
showing like this is what Sydney hardcore looks like. This is what our experience looks like here in Australia, and it's our way of like celebrating that too.
Mm. Absolutely. And I guess in every piece that you put out, even at shows, I think some of the biggest things I remember, whether it be from the Turnstile show or the Christmas show you guys did, I think last year, the biggest thing I remember is your speech of heritage and hometown. Do you think that hits a bit harder for you when you say these things when you're over in the States or over somewhere else? Like, how does it differentiate itself when you're at home than when you're at somewhere else?
When so hardcore in general, like traditionally, has always kind of been like, for lack of a better word, like patriotic in a way. Like New York, if you're from New York, you champion New York hardcore, Boston hardcore, or whatever. And so for us being from Sydney, you know, it was very important, especially with the mission of the band being to promote Australian hardcore culture, and to accelerate that and to rekindle that in a way. It was very important that we brand the band as Speed Sydney Hardcore, and that the word speed and Sydney almost go hand in hand. Um, and that's because it's part of us championing the place that we're from, that we're so proud of, that and recognizing our identity. Um, when we think about the other those hallmarks of the hallmark territories of hardcore, like New York or Boston, they're characterized by their sound. Sydney doesn't necessarily have a sound, or Australia for that fact, but we do have a culture that we're proud of, represented by our friendship circle, represented by our community. And so when we talk about Sydney in that way, that's essentially what we're embodying. We're trying to champion that because we're trying to actively acknowledge and propel a culture and instill a sense of confidence in the people that are part of it. When we
Mm.
go overseas, though, we're guests in other scenes, and I think being involved in Australian hockey for so long, for like the greater part of 20 years, we've definitely been very humbled by our experience and kind of grown up with for lack of a better word, a bit of an underdog mentality. Like
Mm.
Australian hockey hasn't really been recognized on the global stage very much. So when we go overseas, we recognize that we're guests in these scenes, and we feel a lot of gratitude in being welcomed there. So as much as we'll claim Sydney, we're also very conscious that like we're in London or we're in Leeds or we're in Paris. Like this is your scene. Show me what you got. We're from Sydney. Let's celebrate this thing together. I might not speak the same language as you, but we do speak the same language of hardcore, and we can
Mm.
identify with each other at that level. So let's celebrate that right now in this moment. And I think that's just how we acknowledge it when we leave the space, when we leave Australia.
Yeah. And I think that rings true. Like instrumentally, I think as well, your songs have been hitting at the moment. Like I was going to touch on a few songs, but I think the most prolific release of their cycle so far has probably been the first test. And for me, I think it's the little turntable bit that hits the hardest. I think that's great. But obviously, a lot of people are receiving the flute bit a lot. Did you ever think it would be received the way it's been received, just adding a, a bit of a peculiar instrument? Or did you think you had something going there in the studio?
I think we definitely underestimated the impact that it would have, which seems a bit naive in hindsight. I think we knew that obviously, like, it's pretty uncharacteristic for hardcore, and like it was a real point of like emphasis when Jem wrote the part and sent the part to us all. We were like, "Fuck, you put the flute in, huh?" But I don't know if I expected people to like grab onto it as much as they did,
No
because to
fucking
me,
way.
it feels so. It fits the part to me. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't put it in there because we were like, let's put a flute in there and see how crazy people go about it. Like, it
Yeah.
was part of the natural songwriting process. Like, Jem wrote that section, and he wrote that part, and he went, you know what? I think I can hear a flute in this part. Like, it would make sense. And he's played flute for, I mean, how long? Like fucking
I played
20.
flute since I was 8.
Yeah.
I was a flute teacher for 14 years up until last year. We went full time with this band, and I stopped being a flute teacher. It was just a part. It's just this band is about recognizing your identity. The greatest lesson that we've taught that this band has taught us is to accept who you are and embrace that. Find the people, surround yourself with people who accept you as well, and just be on that journey together. And putting something the flute, for one, it sounded fucking fresh, so that's why I was in there. But for two as well, it's also part of me not giving a fuck in my personal journey. The question that people have always asked me since I was a kid was, when are you gonna put the flute in your hardcore songs? And I've always been like, fuck off. Like, I'm not gonna do something for the sake of doing it. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna do something for the gimmick. But it just so happened that the hardest band I actually play, and it made sense sonically. And so we did it. But as I said, like, it's just that part, I guess, is probably on a conceptual level is just reflective of one of our messages, which is just to embrace who you are and not shy away from any of that, because that's what makes you special. And I think that at least the successes, quote unquote successes, we've had over the last 4 years have taught us that when you put your identity in your art, that's when you make your greatest work.
And I don't know, I think only one mode in itself is like intrinsically connected with identity, like you've been saying. And it's become kind of this anthem of representation of your ethos. But I was wondering, like, since touring or even since recording the album to now, has anything changed or shifted how you define your own personal identity and style? Like, have you learned anything between these processes that you would maybe perhaps put into the album now?
We have learned, like, we are learning every single day. I'm
Mm.
learning right now as I'm talking to you. Like things have been so transformative, which I think is also one of the most appealing parts of the experience, is that we are, as I said before, we're on a journey together as 5 friends. And it's the 5 friends immediately, but then all of the people in our support group around us that we're on a journey with too, which is so profound and so amazing. It's just another part of this experience that's just fucking so sick. But the album itself is it's a general, like, encapsulation of our ideologies, and the way that we view the world and the way that we view our interactions with each other internally as a band, and as friends beyond that, So I don't think there's nothing that's changed in terms of the message or in terms of the way that we would have approached the album at all. No.
I think the general thing with this band is that the deeper the kind of rabbit hole goes with it, and the more we kind of throw ourselves into it, it just galvanizes that philosophy that we have even more. Being on the road for 9 weeks was really challenging, but I think we've all come out of it even more dedicated than we were to the band than before we left. You know what I mean? And that didn't seem possible. I couldn't think of being more dedicated to this band than I was before I left. But now, like, after doing it for 9 weeks, like being away, playing shows for 9 weeks, and suffering through all the challenges that come with that, and enjoying all of the successes and all of the highlights of doing that as well. Like, I think we all just feel more motivated than ever to keep running it. So, I mean, Only One Mode could have been the name of any of our records, I think, because it encapsulates the spirit of our band throughout our entire kind of timeline.
Yeah, and I guess not too soon you have an opportunity to present this to Australia. They do
Mhm.
happen to be at, some of the largest venues of your Australian career so far. How are you
Yeah.
gearing up to take your production to that next level whilst also maintaining the show environment you were saying, which like happens to be, barricades, full of
Yeah.
energy and life? How do you kind of, I guess, swindle the venues?
Well, that's a great question. We kind of had like a reckoning. Sorry, we were faced with the challenge now where we've up till last year we've kind of exhausted the venues in Australia that have no barriers.
Yeah.
And so we're in this position of we have to upgrade because people are already complaining about the show selling out and not being able to come see us. But also we want to keep that environment, that spirit, that atmosphere intact. And so with this tour in particular, we thought, well, if we're going to have to accept that there will be a barrier at some of these shows, rather than just putting it at any capacity, let's put it in the places where hardcore just should not exist. Let's put it in the most obnoxious places. And so that's why that most of the venues are all theaters, like the Enmore Theater or the
Yeah.
Northcote Theater. It's like infiltrating spaces that hardcore shouldn't belong. But again, like this is for us by us. Like this is our space and this is our culture, and we're just putting it. If we're gonna bring people into a show environment with a barrier space, at least put it in the most, I said, preposterous kind of place where it's a bit of a spectacle, where you can be like, I'm gonna go to this hardcore show, and it's gonna have a barrier, but at least it's gonna be in the most fucking crazy place that I've ever seen a hardcore show at.
Yeah.
But then beyond that too, though, that's like really nothing. Like we're a hardcore band. We don't rely on smokes and mirrors. We don't rely on pyrotechnics or lighting or anything. We don't even travel with a sound guy. It's just plug and play. We purely rely on the energy, the aggression, and the passion. And that's just what we're going to bring into those environments too.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I had prepared for you guys today, but I can assure you I'll be at the Enmore Theatre, hopefully on the barricade or somewhere in the sky for you guys.
Awesome.
Fuck yeah.
Thanks so much, Georgia. That was great.
No, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.